Of Mice and Miko, Tower 17, Chapter 3. Wednesday. Staring up at the monolith, up at the eastern side of Tower 17, the sun radiated off of the brick that had been polished smooth. I felt the sunlight in the palm of my hand, the fresh air around me. I tried to remember it. I didn't know if this would be the last time I'd experienced nature. Granted, a concrete field was far from anything natural. I looked at the people around me, climbing out of the buses, walking towards the large glass doors at the base of the tower, wondering if we were all just lining up to be slaughtered, to be killed for biological material, or some other unnatural need that Miko possessed. I followed the crowd through large sliding glass doors that led to a giant lobby. Sharp Art Deco lines created a path on the brown polished granite floors leading me forward. Above me, far above me, like a sky, the pressed brass panels reflected light down like a large mirror that mimicked the shapes on the floor perfectly, while ring lights hung down from long cables. The polished walnut wood walls glowed, their surface as smooth as the floor. One could not see the other side of the building from where I stood. It wasn't because of the distance, though I would guess the lobby was the size of a football stadium, bleachers included. But there was a tower within the tower that sat in the center of the lobby. The tower was covered in windows watching over us as we marched. It was like the UFMs built the tower around an apartment building they couldn't get the permit to demolish. The whole thing reminded me of a Las Vegas hotel with the decor of a New York City high-rise. Despite all the opulent decor, the immense building still felt like a prison, like there was only one way out, and there was no door to take you there. I was drowned in the crowd, but I felt alone again. In a room that big, with so many people, I would have expected it to sound like a busy train station, people shouting over each other, as their voices echoed around the room. Instead, there were only the sounds of footsteps marching in beat, while the sounds of grinding tracks led them, like an army marching to its doom. People carried bags containing their whole lives, some with kids, some alone. The whole mass of people seemed to feel a collective fear and dread. Around us, and with us, UFMs were watching, listening, smiling, offering to help carry bags, escorting people, hiding an evil inside. Looking at all those people, I began to wonder how many of those towers there were, and how many people each held. There had to be at least 17, clearly. The unfinished tower that steadily climbed towards the clouds would likely make 18, if not more. Chicago had 2.5 million people before the Miko. Where did they all go? I came all the way from central Ohio, but they were still only filling the second tower. Tower 17 was immense, but at most it could hold a couple thousand people, not millions. I shuddered to think about the bodies. How could they dispose of them? I guess it's better I don't know, I said aloud, no one noticing. As the mass of people moved toward the central tower, it began to thin out. I could see a group of people coming towards us from that tower, like a line of ants. They began pulling people away from the group, bringing them towards the tower. Single people were met by a single person, and couples were met by other couples. Soon, it was my turn. My aunt was in her late 30s and walked with a bounce in her step. She seemed happy there, perhaps too much so. But maybe it was justified. Maybe my preconceptions were wrong. There was something about her that made me doubt my fear. "Hello," she said, her brown hair swaying behind her in a ponytail. "My name's Sally." Her warm hand reached out to grab mine. For a second, lost in her eyes, I forgot. Forgot the destruction outside, forgot my job and my forced relocation, forgot to speak. Sally seemed nice and genuine, human. Even the lobby had a way of softening it all, an air of decadence and class I had never experienced before. Together, there was something about them, something deceptively comforting. The woman gripped my hand, and I snapped back into reality. "I'm Sally, but I already said that," she said, giggling. "And I'm your social commissar." What that means is I'm in charge of helping you acclimate to life here, she said, putting her other hand to her chest. Social commissar? I asked. It's like a volunteer social worker without a degree, she said, sticking her tongue out of her mouth and biting it in a way that betrayed her maturity that felt casually flirtatious. If you come with me, she said, holding my hand tighter, we can go in and finish getting you processed. I resisted a bit. Processing didn't sound fun. Don't worry, it's fun, and it goes real quick. None of that sounded like my experiences with bureaucrats. We cut through the crowd of lost people in UFMs. Sally might have seemed trustworthy, but the UFMs, the Bilkos, they were another story altogether. So, I asked, are there Bilkos everywhere in the tower, or just down here? Sally turned to me, swaying in the wind that I had to assume was generated by the swaying of the mob. We don't use that kind of language here. It's demeaning to the Miko's workers. I felt the eyes of the robots turn towards me, judging me for my slip-up. It felt like I'd blurted out a racial slur, and I was sure to never forget it. I told myself to never let go of that feeling, a feeling foreign, to not let go of it, to never let myself get too comfortable with anyone there. I knew I had to keep my walls up if I had any chances to survive. Survive. Clearly I did, or I wouldn't be here telling you my story. But with the hindsight of time, I would have been better off turning my back, running back into the crowd, escaping then and there, leaving Sally behind me. Maybe I was better for the experience. Maybe not. The walk to the inner tower really couldn't be understated. The inner tower itself was the size of a skyscraper, yet paled in comparison to the outer tower. Inside this smaller tower, things were styled quite different from outside. Gone were the high ceilings and fine furnishings, replaced by low beige carpet and pressed paper ceiling tiles. Fake walls that stood about 5 feet tall split the room into small squares. A proper cubicle jungle. We were met with a security checkpoint and a large banner, clearly the product of generative AI, welcoming all new arrivals. A UFM sat bolted onto a vertical metal detector with a horizontal metal detector implanted in its chest below its screen. Okay, put your bags on the conveyor, and your pocket stuff with your watch in a gray bin so they can be scanned too, Sally said, her brown eyes looking me over, bathing me in warmth. Oh, and you'll have to leave your shoes here, she said, pointing to her feet. Her socks had floppy little dog ears, a detail I hadn't noticed. I hadn't looked at her that closely in the lobby. I searched the room around me. All the commissars had a look about them. It wasn't that they all wore the same outfit, or even the same style, but they all had an intangible quality that they shared I couldn't put my finger on. You won't need them here, Sally reassured me, pointing at my feet. I took them off and left them in a wheelie bin that stunk with abandoned footwear. Hollow banners hung around like a corporate Christmas party, trying to evoke a sense of welcome that was betrayed by the hardly legible font with displaced words and graphics that made no sense, all signs of AI. All around me, people streamed through queues flanked by UFMs. Our continued shared journey. It was starting to feel real, permanent. I know being new here can be intimidating, Sally said, noticing my discomfort. But it's really nice here once you learn the rules, and forget about the outside world. I passed through the scanner, as did my bags. Your bags will be brought up to your room. A lispy cartoon dog voice emanated from the scanner. How long have you been here? I asked as we walked. About a year now, she said. Had the tower really been there for a year, I thought? Was that before? She put her hand up and interrupted me. I told you, there is no before, she said. It's really for the best you just leave everything before the tower in the past where it belongs. None of that matters here. All of that is gone and done now. I know it's hard to let go, but it's for the best. How could I forget, even if I had to? She sat me in front of a bureaucrat, a human in a sea of automation, typing tirelessly. Papers, the elderly woman said from behind her glasses. I handed the envelope to the uninterested woman. The old woman scanned the barcode with a sigh, while Sally stood behind me. "It looks like you passed your risk assessment and your social check," she grumbled. "What does that mean?" I asked. "The risk assessment looked over your medical records to make sure you're healthy and you don't have any substance abuse problems. The social check is to look over your social media to make sure you're a good person and you don't have MDS," Sally said. "MDS?" I asked. "Miko derangement syndrome. It's a mental disease that causes an irrational hatred of the Miko or robots. A lot of people on the outside had it." I was thankful I'd never made any posts about Bilkos or my feelings about them. In fact, I had no social media presence, and I only had an account in a vague attempt to keep in touch with my children who wanted nothing to do with me. The risk assessment was even worse. I wasn't young anymore, and I hadn't exactly been kind to my body. My diet before the Miko wasn't healthy. And even though the Miko took control of the food supply to make it healthier, the damage had already been done to me. I was a child of Red 40. Then Sally dragged me to a nurse UFM, the ears of her socks flopping amusingly as she walked. I knew it was a nurse because it wore a nurse's hat, the sort of thing no one had worn in 60 years. It stuck me with a pair of needles before I could protest. I could see my dark red blood being pulled out through a tube and a murky liquid being pushed into me from another. I tried to pull away, but Sally pushed me closer. "They test your blood to make sure you're clean," Sally explained like the why mattered. "And they didn't miss anything in the risk assessment. And then they give you some vaccine boosters, since we all live so close. So long as everyone gets pricked, no one should ever be sick again." I watched her bounce as we walked to the next station. It helped comfort and distract me from the existential dread that filled me. Even the ears on her socks bouncing like walking dogs under her feet felt like a happy distraction. There was something about her, a sort of sincerity. She gave me a warm feeling, though that was the sort of thing a pretty woman did to a man. We walked to another nurse. This one looked less friendly. The face was the same, of course. But the large gun it held in its hand was menacing. It had a magazine like a nail gun, with a broad-faced nozzle like a box stapler. Sally put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it only hurts a little bit at first." "What is it?" I asked, not too eager to find out for myself. She raised her arm, showing me an inch-long rectangle under her skin. "It's our chip. It unlocks your room door, lets you select floors in the elevator, and lets you pay for things with the credits you earn from your job." "Can't I just get an RFID badge like we had at the factory?" I asked, wary of the gun. "No," Sally said. "People would just lose it all the time." Without a word, the robot clamped my arm in a rubber-coated pincher, then injected the chip into my wrist with a loud kerclunk. "This is just easier." "Near field access module installed. Have a nice day," the robot said as a shooting pain started up my arm like it had been crushed. Then my head went fuzzy as Sally leaned against me to stop me from falling over. Then there was a sharp metallic taste in my mouth that I could feel in my teeth. She pulled me along a winding path while my head was in a daze. It felt like the whole room was empty, like it was a way for me to walk off the pain. They could have had me do anything, and I wouldn't remember it. I didn't remember it.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard and want to hear more, you can like the video or subscribe to the channel. If you want to support the channel and the stories I tell in a more direct way, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Links in the description. Thank you and good night.